Sorry, Stephanie, I'm back. Are we good to go?
To go.
Awesome. Sorry, everybody. I had some Zoom issues. I'm at home today because I have a migraine. So I have my very fashionable sunglasses on and I picked the sunniest place in the house, which was very intelligent. So like Stephanie said, go ahead and throw your name and your location in that chat window. I imagine a few more people will be joining us. Not a big deal if they're late, though. We will be recording, as she said. Stephanie, next slide, please.
Whoa, you went too far.
All right, so community dialogues in support of the Our Planet Earth campaign. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Annie. I'm the Community Engagement and Exhibits Manager at the Space Science Institute.
I'm Stephanie Vero Fields. I am the Relationship Manager at the Space Science Institute.
This is much harder when we're not sitting in the same room. And we also have on the line Greg and Jennifer, who are also at SSI, who are going to be taking some notes and helping us with some links and stuff in the chat. Next, please. So just a real quick agenda for today. This is going to be a very different sort of webinar than we normally do. I'll talk at you for a little bit, but I'm really hoping to talk with all of you, in the spirit of community dialogue. So we're doing our welcome and introductions right now. Check. I want to remind you just a little bit about the Our Planet Earth campaign and why we are doing these community dialogues along with it. We'll do a quick Community Dialogues 101. Talk some about the requirements. I will give you air quotes around the requirements. We're very flexible. I see some folks online that I know, they will promise you that I won't be mean and that the requirements are really what you can do, not anything crazy. And then we'll have a discussion. So I've got a couple migraine discussion prompts for you all that we'll go through. We'll be saving the chat transcript and posting it along with the recording from today. You'll also be able to view the chat transcripts from the other instances of this webinar as well to see ideas that other folks might have come up with. So next slide, please, Stephanie. So you're all in this room, so I assume that means that you all know about our Planet Earth campaign. But I just wanted to talk to you a little bit about the timing and what that might mean for you with these community dialogues. So we decided to do this campaign because we kind of had three big national events happening around the same time as Earth Day. So one is Citizen Science Month. We've had, I believe, a webinar on citizen science, and we'll have another one soon. 50th anniversary of Earth Day, obviously. And then very recently, ALA has adopted sustainability as one of its new core values of librarianship. So we know a lot of libraries already doing fantastic things around sustainability in their community, but they're wanting to make it a little more official with this new ALA core value. So we're hoping to help a little bit with that. Stephanie? So again, we're going to go through a quick crash course on community dialogues in public libraries. Before I do that, before I scare any of you off, I did just want to remind you that we already have your address for those cool games that you've registered for. Even if it turns out that this thing we're talking about isn't going to be right for your library, you'll still get your games, so please don't worry about that. We're really just wanting to give you some options of how you can do some neat stuff with your patrons and not trying to, again, do anything too complicated or difficult. So community dialogues are, excuse me, informal conversations with community stakeholders, leaders, and members. Just at that definition probably sounds like something most of you already do, which is fantastic. There's a couple different frameworks out there for working with the public. The most popular one with ALA right now is the Harwood method. If anyone's seen that, it's a binder about this thick with a lot of very clear steps. And if you're a very step-oriented person, you should probably do the Harwood method. If you're more like me and you want something that's more flexible and not so set on the timing or what things look like, that's why we developed the community dialogue model to help folks who might not really be at that step of that kind of high level going through strategic plan level initiatives. So these dialogues encourage libraries to reach out to new partners, consider how to better reach underserved audiences, as well as better meet their patrons where they are. So as you will have seen when you registered to participate in a dialogue, the community dialogues right now are part of an ongoing research process, and you guys participating are actually helping us to evolve the current framework so that folks can better benefit from them. We can provide different resources, better webinars, different handouts, and that sort of thing. And also with the hopes of encouraging other informal venues to contribute and participate as well. So museums, community centers, that sort of thing. Stephanie? So I like to throw up this slide just to scare people, but it doesn't need to be scary. A lot of you have probably heard the term learning ecosystems. Are you in one? Are you not? Who knows? A lot of you are probably the community engagement folks at your library. And finally, the word collective impact gets thrown out a lot. In the learning environment, we need to have collective impact, organizations working together from all over the community, one big impact. And that's really hard to do. I don't think these community dialogues will necessarily help you do it in that way. But we do think, based on our little chart here, that they could be one spoke. So if you're part of a learning ecosystem, if you're really passionate about community engagement, and you utilize a couple of different strategies to try to pull all that together, I think it might lead you down a collective impact road. It's certainly not a word we're going to use to describe any of this work, but I think a good one to keep in mind as it shows up in solicitations and things like that. Good, Stephanie, next. I keep trying to push next and there's no button here. I should take more medicine. I wanted to share with you real quick. So we've done these community dialogues in about 100 libraries across the country. To be clear, I've been to a dozen of them. We have facilitated libraries in conducting these dialogues at 100 locations across the country. Lisa Jackson at the Broward County African American Research Library has actually done 3 or 4 of these. So the thing that she said after her very first dialogue is captioned here: "There's no doubt that the community dialogues are beneficial to all parties. I think this method should be employed more often when we're considering all kinds of services, initiatives, and programs for our community." Sounds like a nice thing I asked her to say, right? But what I really liked about it is she's already doing all kinds of community engagement, community conversation. They do focus groups. They do what I think a lot of libraries do. But what she explained to me is that they have to do it in a very focused fashion. If they're having, a focus group that was that the migraine brain, that the Stephanie, what's the overarching library structure called? Oh my goodness. If they're having some sort of focus group that people have asked them to do at a higher level, it's for one particular purpose, right? Maybe we're talking about how we're rolling out library cards. Maybe we're talking about community outreach, but it has a really set purpose. What she liked about these dialogues is that purpose is kind of emergent through the conversation. So you might have a high level thing like, we want to talk about STEM in our library. Those are okay. The ones that I think have been the most beneficial are ones where people say things like, who are the people in our community we're not currently reaching? Who are underserved audiences who could better be served by our programs? That's very open, and it allows a lot of different people to come in and join in those conversations and be part of the solution. Not just, I don't know if anyone's fans of Parks and Recreation, but if you've seen Leslie Knope doing those community panels and not getting a word in edgewise and people throwing food at her, that's what we're trying to avoid in these sort of dialogues, right? It should be a two-way street with people who actually want to listen to each other. So not, I'm going to stand at a podium while you tell me what my library is doing wrong. No, everyone's going to sit together at a table and discuss what they can do different and how they can support each other. Another thing you'll notice in this picture right here, so this is from a community dialogue in Broward that I attended 2 weeks ago. Excuse me, and I was on an airplane and now I'm coughing. Just kidding, I think. So this was at Broward, and one of the things that we'd heard from a lot of folks is that people want to attend these dialogues, but they're not really sure how do we get childcare? How do we, if we want to hear from the people in the community who most need our support, they need supports in participating. So Broward made it really clear that people could bring their kids. Lisa had Legos and robots and stuff set up in a corner. Sometimes the kids answered our questions, not this little one, she couldn't talk. But there were some older kids who sometimes answered the questions because they were excited about the topics and the conversation too. So again, just another opportunity to point out that we're not prescribing any one way to talk to your community because we wouldn't know how to do that. But just the idea that if you get out there and talk to people, they want to be heard from and they want to help and they want to listen. Go ahead, Stephanie, next. So the thing everyone kept emailing me about, what do I have to do to get my game, Annie? Oh my goodness. So not a whole lot. Again, this is a research project and we're just really interested in everyone's opinions and how this works out for them. So our very loose requirements is 1, you participate in a webinar. Check. Jennifer has checked all your names off. If you disappear right now, you've already met that requirement and we won't even know the difference. And we'll also ask you to complete a brief community dialogue reflection report. So that is for one person per library. So the person who kind of organized the community dialogue, it'll just be a Survey Monkey survey with a couple questions, just asking you if you thought the guide and the supports were relevant, if you thought you'll do this again, that kind of thing. So we'll email that link to all of you and it'll also be posted on the community dialogue website around next week, depending on how much sleep I get and how much sleep Stephanie gets. We'll also ask you to distribute a separate survey to patrons, other staff who participated in the dialogue but perhaps didn't plan it, and or your community partners. Again, we'll email you that link and it'll be posted on the website. Now, this was the point yesterday where some folks asked, wait, you have patron, staff, and community partners listed here. Who the heck comes to this dialogue? So we'll talk about that a little more when we get into the discussion. But really, the idea for these dialogues when we started them, I always like to tell this story because we really didn't know what was happening, which is not any of you who know me. I know Jude's on the line here. It's not surprising that I didn't know what was happening. We were doing a program called Discover Health, Descubre la Salud. It was about health science, and I'm an astronomer. And I had to make a health science exhibit. So I was doing this in Colorado, and we had partners at an organization called the Area Health Education Centers. So what I was planning on doing was going around to every community that was going to get the exhibit. And we just had a little meeting, a couple-hour meeting about what health topics were really important in their community, both things that the librarians have seen and things that those health educators knew about from their work. To kind of build the exhibit up. And we had a couple meetings like that. And I noticed the further I went in having these meetings in all these very rural, very underserved areas in Colorado, the more people started showing up. So we'd notice people from Immigration Center were coming, people representing homeless shelters started to come, like just through word of mouth. They heard, oh, you guys are talking about a thing, an exhibit and some programs about what we need in our community, and we want to come and participate. By the end, we'd have these meetings with 15 or 20 people, various levels of import and kind of power in the community, right? We had like a mayor show up to one of them because they were really excited and really interested. So all that is to say, it's evolved even for us, so it can certainly evolve for you. What we initially suggested to folks is that you were bringing in those community leaders, and I say that with a big ol' asterisk next to it. My favorite story about what's a community leader when it comes to the dialogues is one of our NASA at My Library partners actually told us that it was Joe from the sandwich shop. So they were in a food desert, and literally everyone every day got almost all of their meals from Joe and his sandwich shop. So he was a restaurateur. He wasn't the mayor. He wasn't like in charge of the hospital. He was just someone who knew everyone and, maybe a busybody, I don't know, knew all their concerns, and was really important to them that Joe came to their community dialogue because he would know what issues there were in the community far before anybody else did. So that was initially what we suggested, those community leaders. Then we started hearing that libraries were inviting community members, which is absolutely fine. And I think it's great as long as they're very excited to help, not just tell you what you need to do. So that's my big caveat when you're deciding. If you think that you're a great facilitator and you can wrangle the crowd, do it, make it open, invite everybody. If you're a little more like me, I know it's hard to imagine, I'm very loud right now, but I have a hard time getting people back on track or asking them to please stop talking, this isn't relevant, you might want to consider just doing community leaders who you might be able to corral back in. Again, we don't want the Leslie Knope situation of people yelling at you and then leaving, never to be seen again. That's not beneficial for anybody. But again, totally up to you. Stephanie, I'm going to take a sip of my coffee. Would you like to talk a little bit about the possibility of having teens in the library lead the dialogue?
Yeah, so one of the things we've come up with is we also have a teen community dialogue guide. And the idea behind this is that, you could have a great teen group near you, maybe in connection with the high school, and that, a lot of times teens are looking for these leadership opportunities, whether it's for college, whether it's for high school requirements, but these are a great way of kind of getting a specific demographic to lead part of this community dialogue. It can open up the doors of bringing in maybe a group you're trying to figure out how to reach. We do know teens is kind of a difficult area. So having this teen-led dialogue could really benefit your library. And it also kind of takes a little bit of off of you, is, they're the ones doing it. You're kind of more of a coach, less of the actual facilitator. And this could be a great opportunity for the kids in your community. Back to you, Annie.
Excellent. Sorry, you cut off right there at the end. I was like, oh no, is she talking to me? And then thank you. I was just having a brain freeze there for a second.
No, you're good.
And then the last request that we have is send pictures if you can. If people are comfortable having their picture taken, don't really care. I just want the opportunity. If you guys have had a great event and you're really proud of it, I'd love to be able to include some of those pictures in future webinars, in our guide, things like that. Stephanie, next slide. So now we come to the conversation portion of this. So I know not everybody has a microphone. So if you want to just type out your answers in the chat, that's absolutely fine. Otherwise, feel free to unmute and talk to us through these discussion questions. So the first easy one, I think, is why do you want to do a community dialogue? And if your answer is Annie, because your game looked really cool, that's a good answer too, but I also need you to make up a real one.
And everyone should, I have made it so that way everybody can speak. So you just have to go, there should be a little panel thing at the bottom for you to mute and unmute. Feel free to unmute if you want, or like Annie said, drop it in the chat and we will speak it to everyone.
Oh goodness, I know some of you, and I'm gonna call on you if you don't talk. Luna.
So I'll Luna, let me see if I can unmute you. Do you have access to a microphone?
Okay, can you hear me?
We can, excellent.
Oh, cool. I usually stay muted because as sure as I open the speakers up, the dogs start arguing.
That's all right.
I'd like to do a discussion to get in touch with people that I can network with, like the local museums, and what can we do to help one another. I'd also like to be in touch with groups of people that don't use the library as much and see what we need to do to make them feel more welcome. Like we used to have a lot of deaf and hard of hearing clients come in when I was doing sign language story times. Well, those story times aren't taking place now, but I'd like to find out what we can offer them to get them to feel like they're more welcome in the library, because they're a group that very rarely will use public library. And the homeschooling groups, what can we do to better be a better resource for them? So there are lots of groups I'd like to figure out how to make feel welcome and make want to use the library more.
That's
fantastic. Can I answer your question?
That exactly answers my question. Thank you, Luna. Those of you who don't know, Luna is one of our bloggers on the StarNet website, and she's fantastic. Luna, if you wanted to do one of your blogs around kind of preparing for the community dialogues, I think that would be great.
Okay, because I'm getting ready to do one tonight, and then so I'll put that on my list.
Fantastic. Thank you.
It might not be tonight's, but I'll put it on the list.
That's okay. I won't look at it if it was tonight. Stephanie, do you want to read the ones in the chat? I can't read them.
Yeah, so Naomi said their library is surrounded by refineries.
Oh,
So conversations around that. Rachel said we have several requests for Earth Day events, and I thought a community dialogue would be a good low stress way to get patrons involved. Absolutely, that's a great way to use it. Jude said we had a meeting with community members as we began construction for a major renovation. So one of the things I want to point out, yes, we're doing these and we're kind of like associating them with Earth Day. However, if you guys have like topics you want to cover first that are more important, absolutely. Like, we are incorporating these into Earth Day because Earth Day is a great opportunity for community dialogues. It's a great way because our Earth, everybody lives on this Earth. It's all connected. And so it's a great way to have those conversations. But if you're going through a major renovation, if you want to meet these people and get them into your library first before you focus on that, these are great opportunities to do that. We love that it's Earth Day focused that some of you guys are doing, and that's perfect. But if you have other kind of broader topics you want to do first and then do a community dialogue later on that deals with Earth focused or community engagement focused things, that's fine too.
absolutely. Thank you, Stephanie. Anyone else have any other thoughts on this? I can give you a couple more examples while you're thinking and or typing of why people have done these dialogues before. So like Stephanie was saying, we're kind of focusing on Earth Day right now. In the past, we've done ones that are around, how can you get more access to STEM people, right? People who do STEM in your community. But frankly, the ones that have been the most meaningful and impactful for folks are the ones where they're looking at exactly what Luna was talking about, which is trying to identify who are the underserved groups in your community that could be benefiting more from your services than they already are. That's the other big difference, I think, between these community dialogues and kind of normal focus groups that I'm sure many of you have already done. Is focus groups are for your patrons, right? They're focused on the people that are already there. We're really hoping with these dialogues that you're able to speak, if not directly, at least then through some sort of proxy with folks who aren't currently comfortable using your venue. So why wouldn't they be comfortable, right? Libraries are the most welcoming places. And you're absolutely right. That's true, especially compared to other places like museums. But there are still subsets of folks who just don't realize the library is there for them. Very good example here in Colorado, while we were doing the health community dialogues, is with a recent immigrant Mexican-American population. In Mexico, libraries are really meant for the university, for scholars, right? They're the big shiny beacons on the hill. Normal folks, me and you, we aren't allowed to be there. So until people have come and told them, hey, did you know there's these cool programs and free stuff at the library? They literally didn't know. And that's true of a lot of other cultures too, especially when coupled with concerns of, well, I heard there's this thing called a library card. Does that mean they're going to ask me for my mailing address or to see my ID? I don't have one of those. What are they going to do? What are they going to do when I try to go into that venue? So kind of outreach to the leaders in those communities. So maybe that's the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, maybe it's a church, maybe it's some other cultural organization, just to let them know what you guys have is a huge step. Yeah, and like Naomi said, Mexican libraries have fees, kind of like a membership. Another barrier, even if they wanted to go, they think that they won't be able to do it.
Jude,
Stephanie, go on to the next slide.
yeah, and Jude also said, if you are doing controversial programming, would a community dialogue be a good idea to hear people out, or do you feel that it might move people to be more obstructive?
Jude, that's a fantastic idea. And I know that you have done, I feel like every time ALA has a controversial exhibit, you take it. But I know when Muslim Journeys was going around, which I know you particularly had pushback on, there were quite a few libraries that did exactly that to begin with. So they had kind of a town hall ahead of time. And yeah, people got mean and people got rude. But people also heard the other side directly from the other side, right? And I felt like from what I heard, most of the libraries were very happy that they did those conversations ahead of time just to humanize the issue, right? Especially in places where there weren't a lot of Muslim Americans there, having people actually see and talk to the people that they, in this case, hated so much, helped them come around a bit to understanding why it was okay and appropriate. So again, this really comes down to your facilitation skills. If you're the type of person that can kind of wrangle in that sort of thing, if it starts to happen, great, go for it. If you're the type of person that's going to be really hard for you and you don't want to put potentially vulnerable members of your population at some sort of risk. I'd avoid doing it that way, but there are other ways to have these conversations and to let people air their thoughts without it being kind of a physical thing. Something one of our NASA at My Library partners did, because the librarian was very shy and quiet and she really didn't want to have to stand and talk to people. She just did a program that had multiple stations. So station 1 was a cool hands-on activity from the clearinghouse, like a Space Rock Sherlock, or I just totally forgot, UV Kid with the astronaut, right? And then the next station was a big sticky note with a question that they wanted people to weigh in on. And then the next station was another activity. The next station was another question, so on and so forth, right? So that they got all of that feedback, but in a very kind of unobtrusive environment, because people were playing and having fun, but also really getting to those tricky questions. Oh yeah, Jude says for Muslim Journeys, they had an interfaith panel. Tempers ran high. Again, you guys are all great, being willing and excited to do all of these hot topic things. Climate change is nothing compared to what some of you guys have hosted in your library, honestly. Stephanie, go on to the next slide, please. So who will you invite? So again, guys, feel free to unmute. Excuse me, on our website, and Greg, if you wouldn't mind listing the community dialogue website real quick, there is a whole page of the type of folks that people who've hosted these dialogues have invited before. So like the obvious ones you think of, the mayor, Sandwich Joe guy, who we already talked about, Girl Scouts, Boy Scouts, things like that. But it's really dependent on your community, right? And what's important for you in your dialogue. So does anyone have any ideas right now? I know Luna's already shared a couple. And maybe we'll take it a step further, since Luna did have, Naomi says teacher, since Luna did have some ideas already. Luna, if these are folks who aren't already coming to your programs, how do you plan to invite them?
Oh, that's the fun part.
That's why I asked you.
Some of them I would contact through their groups or online organizations, like the Unschoolers of Memphis is one. There are a couple different homeschooling organizations. I would contact them through their websites and see if I could get in touch with them that way, or maybe meet with them in one of the places where they meet. Homeschoolers are notoriously hard to pin into one place. They're everywhere. The deaf community, I would contact the Deaf Connect, the sign language club at Rhodes College, which is a large sign language group in Memphis, of hearing and siblings of deaf. And I do a sign language program at another branch, so I would talk to maybe some of the families that attend that. Interestingly, though, most of the people that attend that story time are hearing people curious about sign language.
Oh, okay.
But they may have a reason in that they have friends or family, or that they know deaf people. There's also a large church in Memphis that has a large deaf community. So I would look for where they are going and try to contact them in places where they are going, where they already feel comfortable, and then invite them into the library. That's the plan.
That's really good advice. That idea of, and Stephanie, if you wouldn't mind just typing these words into the chat so that we have it for later, of going to where people are already comfortable. That's 99% of it, right? You're not going to, no matter how much you send out a flyer or, put up all these cool posters at the library, if people aren't coming, they're not going to see it, right? They're at the grocery store, they're at church, they're at their kids' school. Being comfortable going out to those places is really important. I'd like some other people, if you don't mind. Oh, good, Jude's got one to contribute. Before we read what Jude said, I did want to let you guys know this program is part of a larger NASA network, and there are a few members of that network that are really excited to participate with people in their community dialogues, and Greg will share some of these links. One of them is Night Sky Network. If you're not familiar with them, they are amateur astronomers that have giant telescopes, and they will come to your library for free and do events about the nighttime sky. maybe that doesn't sound like a community dialogue, but boy, don't you think people will be excited to come to a dialogue that at the conclusion there's like soda and beer and astronomers? Sounds fun to me. There's also a group called the Solar System Ambassadors. That's another free NASA volunteer network. So there's just a map you go to, which again, I think Greg will send you the link to that. You find the solar system ambassador near you and you let them know either if this is just for a program, that you're looking for a program, or that you're conducting a community dialogue through StarNet and you're really wanting to know if they'd like to participate. The great things about people like Night Sky Network and Solar System Ambassadors is they already know a lot of people in your local community because of all of these educational outreach things they're doing. So at the very least, picking their brain to get an idea of who these people you should be talking to are would be a fantastic use of time. One of the other networks that is excited to come out and participate in the dialogue, if you'd like them to, is Girl Scouts. So one of the big NASA programs right now is being run through SETI, the Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence, and they're running a whole Girl Scout badge program. So again, the idea, you know, what's a Girl Scout going to contribute to the dialogue, except they are so socially and environmentally conscious right now, and they have a really good pulse on what's happening in the community. And again, the idea of making your dialogue fun, have food, do activities, do stargazing afterwards, and Girl Scouts would definitely be able to help with that as well. Jude says, beer at a library, I'd be run out of town. We're in Boulder, it's the Wild West here, we have no laws. Stephanie, could you read Jude's other comment?
Yeah, so she said, we went to the local county hospital to read to children in the waiting room of the children's clinic. We invited their parents, most of whom were immigrants. They were afraid to use a public library as it is a government entity. We gave them specific invitations to events. Some did come.
That's fantastic. And that reminds me of, I've been reading a lot about libraries who have set up like, you know, half-hour or hour-long pop-up libraries, like in a place you do laundry, a laundromat, or the grocery store, or places like that. Again, getting to people where they are. Great idea. Stephanie, next slide. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, something to think about too, because you will come across people who may say no. They may be like, you know, you go to your Hispanic Chamber of Commerce and they're like, listen, this is not something we have time for, not something we are interested in right now. Don't let that discourage you. One of the things that I got taught in my last job is if somebody can't attend, just be like, okay, well, who should I go talk to then? Who do you think would be interested in this? Always asking that follow-up question of who should I invite next time, even with, even after the end of your dialogue. Like if you're just like, who should I invite to this next time? You never know the network that people have in your community. So you may get invited, you may reach that person that is that Joe the sandwich guy that you didn't know anything about and invite them next time. So just always, always ask, you know, thank you for your consideration. Who else should I talk to? That will definitely help you kind of expand your network even further.
And before we go to the next one, I just wanted to remind everyone, we'll be able to see it all in the transcript, so it's not a huge deal. But if you're typing things, make sure that you're labeling them to all panelists and attendees, and then everyone else in the chat who's not me and Stephanie can see what you're saying as well.
Yep.
Go on to the next one, please. Thank you.
Can I jump in with a suggestion?
Please.
I have found that when I make a contact and they're kind of hesitant, they're like, man, we don't know that we're interested. We don't know that you can help us. We don't know if we want to participate. If you come back with giving them an offer, can I set up a little bookshelf in your location with donations to people, you know, that I'm not going to miss or that you have to maintain, that books that have been donated or discarded that people can just have, or, you know, books that children can look at while their parents are filling out the 16 million forms they got to fill out for unemployment or documentation or naturalization or whatever the agency is. If you start out helping them, then they get more friendly and more open to being reciprocal in activity and action.
Absolutely.
That's a great suggestion, Luna. Absolutely. We want these to be two-way streets. We want these to be conversations between you and your community. So, you know, sometimes you might have to, I use the analogy, you have to make a few deposits before you can withdraw something. So it's like you have to make a few, you know, do things for them first, and then they're going to be more willing to help you out in creating those two-way streets. So that's a great suggestion, Luna. Thank you.
Absolutely. So our next question here is, what are the big environmental issues in your community? Jude, I'm just going to go ahead and pick on you and make you talk first. Can you talk a little bit about what was happening when Discover Earth came to your library?
And Jude, do you have a microphone? Because that might be easier if you talk. I can unmute you if you do. Oh,
Jude does not have a mic. So while Jude is typing, because it's a long, funny story, not funny, that was terrible, a long, tragic with a good ending story. Stephanie, what are some environmental issues here in Boulder?
Recycling, composting, those are some of the things they talk about. One of the big ones is keeping, so the Boulder Creek runs through the center of Boulder. A lot of people use in the summertime for tubing and fishing and kayaking. You know, we're in Colorado, we're huge outdoorsy people. So a lot of conversations they've had is how to keep the Boulder Creek clean, how to make sure that they're not dumping contaminants into it, so that way it's safe for everyone, how to make sure they're not hurting the local wildlife. So those are some of the big topics that they have going on here, but also wildfire, you know, making sure that things are mitigated properly, so that way wildfires don't impact the creek and the streams and things like that. Naomi says water and contamination. Exactly. I live in an area where the pipe burst and flooded close to major Houston freeway.
Right.
Exactly. That's, you know, we've heard about it in Detroit quite often. Jude said Discover Earth came just after Sandy hit Long Island. My parents were in Connecticut, so I'm very much familiar with that. Our front doors were knocked in. Most of our town did not have electricity for weeks. Some staff lost their homes. That is absolutely terrible, and I completely relate because my parents were in Connecticut when Sandy hit, and it was very traumatizing. So this is definitely a huge, big environmental issue for your community. So it's like, what do you do when you have these planned things and then all of a sudden a natural disaster hits?
And does anybody else have any other big issues? So we asked for big issues. Thank God it doesn't all have to be big things, right? Like, how can the school do better with recycling? How can the library start a compost heap? Just things that'll let people feel like, I'm gonna get political here for a second. A lot of people feel like they're not very much in control of their own destiny right now. And this is really an opportunity for people to gain some of that control back, even if it's in a pretty so yeah, Jude continued her story saying, Discover Earth was delivered. They set it up and opened on time. It was the best, one of the best things that could have happened, and brought the community together. One of the things I really liked about that particular exhibit is it had a wall where people could share their stories of their town from the past 100 years. And if I remember correctly, people at Jude's library were really looking at, like, how has our coastline changed? How have the fisheries changed? Because of this big event. And no, it didn't fix it, but it allowed people to let their stories be heard, and also hear that they weren't the only ones in that situation, and, you know, a little bit of solidarity. She said opening day brought in 2,500 people in 4 hours. My exhibit wasn't that good. Naomi said the town around the library is a food desert. That's huge. And I just imagining, like, I know the libraries around here during the summer have to kind of pick up the slack for schools, right? When it comes to kids on free and reduced lunch, because those kids are going to eat otherwise. Like, big, huge issues.
Oh, Naomi also said, but we have poor soil quality due to Port Houston soil deposits. Yeah, that's a huge issue. And that's something you can definitely ask your community about and community leaders. We partner with the Houston Food Bank in the summer. Exactly. So your libraries are these great resources for your communities. And that's why the community dialogues are important. It's, you know, one of the things for environmental issues, you could be asking, you know, what are you talking about? What's concerning to you? And, you know, what is something that you guys can work on? Because, yeah, you hear climate change, it's a buzzword. It gets people talking both negatively and positively. But by presenting this of what's something in our environment that we need to talk about. I live in a very agricultural community. I'm surrounded by farms and ranches where I live. You know, you only go 30 miles outside of Boulder and you are in the country. So for my community, a lot of the times it's, You know, how do we make sure that the soil doesn't get eroded? How do we make sure we have the right nutrients in the soil? How do we make sure that we don't have issues with the fracking that we have going around us, impacting our water and our soil and our, you know, food products? So there's a lot of these conversations that can happen.
Mm-hmm. Why don't you go ahead to the next slide? So this is the big one. This is the one that's kind of my hill I die on, right? What are the barriers in your library preventing people from participating in these conversations? And we've talked about it a little bit already, right? Folks who are afraid because you're a government entity, folks who don't realize the libraries are free and open to them. But I think it's also worth looking at, and this is something you can do prior to having these conversations, right? Looking at what things you've tried to do to be inclusive that might be backfiring. Again, I learned so much from our Discover Health libraries. Some of the things we saw happening there, one of the libraries, this guy, bless his soul, he was so excited to work more with the Spanish speaking kids in his community. He spoke Spanish fluently. And he was just so excited. So he set up a story time corner that was all for Spanish language storybooks. And he wrote a big sign above that corner that said Spanish language storybooks in English. So when we did the focus group with members of that community, asking them, why is nobody using that stuff? They said, we didn't know it was for us. We thought that was for the white kids to learn Spanish, because why would you put it in English if it was meant for the recent immigrants who didn't speak English that well, right? We also heard some patrons at a different library saying that they were so excited to see that big welcome sign in like 10 different languages, right? Oh, that must mean that they're very open and are willing to work with people. But that was the only thing in that entire library. And they said they would have rather just not had that than get kind of that false hope up that there were going to be not even people there who spoke their language, but like, you know, a schedule in Spanish, right? Or something like that. So also making sure not to make efforts for the sake of checking a box, because that's sometimes worse than making them at all.
So Naomi said one of her barriers is high turnover rate due to a high renters community. That is a very big barrier. I don't know how to help with that.
Well, I know when I rented while my house was being built, and the welcome packet that I got at the apartment actually came with like a letter from the library and like a little kid's book. The same thing I've gotten welcome to the same library like 3 different ways. When my son was born at the hospital, they gave that same little packet with the cute little book and the welcome information. But that requires the library having the money to do those things, right?
I think something to do is maybe then work with community leaders that are already engaged. So things at your local community center, churches, VFW posts, things like that. They may have connections to these two, you know, people coming in and out. And that way you may get different people, but if you have the community leader that's, I hate to use the word funneling, but if they're funneling people towards you, that might help. Even though you have this high turnover, if you have people talking about your library, you'll maybe have people still coming in.
Mm-hmm.
What are other barriers some of you guys have also faced or feel like that will stop people from coming?
And because gosh, I just can't stand silence. I'm really bad. You know, you're supposed to like wait 8 seconds before you talk. Can't do that. If one of the barriers is, wow, I'm still really not comfortable doing this. The reason we're doing multiples of these webinars with these smaller groups is to hopefully let you guys know that we're here to talk through this stuff with you. If you want to have another group phone call, if you want to just have a one-on-one phone call to talk through these things, and we can give you some suggestions and advice from our other libraries who've done it. We're really invested in these things working well for you guys too. So we're happy to help if the barrier is understanding. We're definitely, oh God, Jude, why'd you say it? Yep, coronavirus. Our attendance for programs is way down in the last week. Oh gosh, can you do it on Facebook Live? I just don't even know. Yeah, no, it's a huge deal right now. Like our schools are probably not going to open after this week.
Yeah,
And
so
we don't even have that much here. Colorado's fine.
that's totally the elephant in the room.
Yeah.
Sorry, Jamie just walked by and is sighing at me because I'm still in here. So coronavirus is definitely a thing. That is the elephant in the room. You know, we're talking about bringing all people together when our government is telling us stay at home, do not engage. So you can stream things similar to what we're doing. One thing we want to emphasize, these do not have to be done in the next month. You know, if you want to plan to do this after summer reading, because you guys get really crazy during summer reading, if this is a fall thing you want to do or a winter thing when things have calmed down, that is absolutely okay. You know, this is not something you have to do by Earth Day or by April 30th. You know, if you are able to get it together and you guys are in somewhere that's not heavily impacted by coronavirus, go for it. But use these tools and maybe think about pushing it out where the threat isn't as high. Because we all understand, like, we don't know in Colorado, like, are we going to be shut down? Like, what's going on there? There is a lot of uncertainty out there. And so we completely understand.
Yeah, and we didn't, because we were asked if we were going to cancel these webinars. A couple people asked because the timing would be suspect. And we said, no, we want to get this information out to you guys, and we'd love for you to try it. Like Stephanie said, if that means not till the fall or next year, that's fine. Not a big deal. Why don't you go ahead to the next slide? We'll get this wrapped up here. Yep, so to access all these great resources, well, that was self-serving. These things I wrote, they're great. You should read them. They're at this link, and Greg will also put it down there in the chat, and the chat will be put up on the website tomorrow, so you can get back to all of those links. So this community dialogue site includes templates for invitations. So if you're like, oh, Annie told me to reach out to these people, but I don't want to write a thing, you don't have to. I wrote it for you. You can just put their name in it. There's also the community dialogue guide, any of the pictures on this website from past dialogues. If you need to use those to show people what this really looks like, feel free to do it. There's also some references in there from Harwood and from some of the other methods that we've borrowed some pieces from. Excuse me. So Stephanie, go ahead, next slide. And then lastly, I just wanted to give another pitch for the STEM Activity Clearinghouse. This is where we put all of our great hands-on activities. And again, if the idea of running one of these community conversations without the safety of, you know, chenille sticks or whatever else we want to do fun activities with robots isn't appealing to you, great, do a dialogue with these activities, and those have worked out really well too. So Stephanie and I will, Stephanie, if you go ahead and put our email addresses in the chat box, that'd be great. We'll stay on for a few minutes in case anyone has any other questions or concerns. Otherwise, thank you guys so much for joining us. You'll probably be getting the games for registering for Earth Day within about, I'm gonna make up a number, Greg's on the line, he might know better. I'd say 1 to 2 months, and then the community dialogue one, perhaps like another month or month and a half after that. So they will show up separately when you get them.
Does anybody have any other questions for us?
Well, this is more on my own part, but did y'all get the change of address for me?
We did, thank you.
If you send it to the library, it's going to get lost somewhere, so it'd be better if you just send it to me.
Yes, I saw it. I will double check with our AP people that they have figured it out.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
Absolutely.
A lot of my mail just is vanishing, so
Yeah.
It's easier to get it if it's sent to my house.
Makes sense.
Oof. I didn't see, Naomi said that Houston is freaking out because of coronavirus. They just canceled the rodeo.
That's man. Houston canceling the rodeo.
Wow. Well, originally I was going to do mine on an Earth Day theme about pollution and recycling in Memphis, but everybody's scared to death of everything and wearing masks and freaking out. So I'm like, nah, I can wait.
Well, and you know, turning something into a positive, you can have a community dialogue on the coronavirus. You know, if you go to the CDC and find out the information, this may be a great way to help calm your community too. Granted, pulling everybody together may not help, but if this
that's a good plan for like a Facebook Live kind of program.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. It's like a streaming type of thing. This may help.
Yeah, it might be hard to get them together in a giant group to talk about not getting together in a giant group.
Yeah.
Funny
But
that.
live streaming or Facebook streaming or something like that could be beneficial at least. So Ju said, we are still going ahead with programming and playing it by ear. We did cancel a bus trip. So, and I think that's the smartest way is, you know, we don't want to panic and say the theater's on fire when it's not, but making smart controlled steps currently can help for the future.
Yeah. Cautiously optimistic is a good thing.
That's
Yep.
right. Stephanie, I'm sorry. I'm going to go run away because my brain's exploding. But if there's any other questions, let Stephanie know and she'll let me know.
Yep. So if you guys have any questions, if not, you guys are free to go. We appreciate you being on and chatting with us and giving us, you know, some great ideas and helping out your fellow library staff to also help in them. Does the community dialogue have to center on environmental topic or is any topic related to STEM? You can make it whatever you want. It doesn't even have to be STEM related. Now you can use it for that, Kristen. But like what Luna was talking about, how she's just asking how to engage specific people in her community. You can start broadly like that and then focus it. We just thought that since Earth Day is coming and our environment is something we are talking about, these are great ways to start those conversations, but it doesn't have to center on an environmental topic or a topic related to STEM. You can make it broader if that's what you choose. The nice thing about this is you can have multiple community dialogues about different topics. Bye, Jude. Absolutely. And of course, my email is in there and so is Annie's. If you guys have any further questions you think of tomorrow or later on today, feel free to shoot us an email. We are more than willing and excited to help you. All right, if there's no more questions, I will end this now. Thank you guys all for coming, and we look forward to hearing about your community dialogues. You guys have a good rest of your day.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.